Welcome to josephsmithspolygamy.org, the audio version. The practice of polygamy expanded as the Latter-day Saints migrated to the Rocky Mountains in 1846. Their move away from Illinois and its state laws that condemned the matrimonies brought them into U.S. territories that did not prohibit it. Nonetheless, early Utah pluralists recognized that defending it as a legitimate religious practice would not be an easy task. Plural marriage on earth expands a man's emotional and sexual opportunities as a husband, as it simultaneously fragments a woman's emotional and sexual opportunities as a wife. While it would be undoubtedly different in the eternal worlds, on earth it is difficult to defend as fair and non-sexist. In an 1855 issue of the Church's Millennial Star, Apostle Franklin D. Richards acknowledged an additional challenge they faced. The subject of polygamy arouses the prejudice of the pious, appeals to the virtue of the honest, and stirs up the muddy pool of corruption in the hearts of the licentious. Its virtues will be seen and appreciated or misconstrued into evils, according to the medium through which men view it. In a later issue, he empathized with the critics. We are not surprised that men of reflection and virtue, having a knowledge of the world, should feel indignant at polygamy. They look upon it as something pandering to the brutal passions of man, and from the exceeding low standard of virtue can scarce conceive of anything but lasciviousness associated with the sex. We respect the conscientious feelings of such men, for we know that with their ideas of such things, they must be extremely revolting. Church apologists attempted to defend the practice by adopting explanations to defray these criticisms. Apparently, the four reasons given by Joseph Smith in D&C 132 were either not very convincing to unbelievers or offensive to their Christian sentiments. The first two, as part of the restitution of all things and as a special trial for Latter-day Saints at that time and place, could be easily understood by Bible believers, but they were not very compelling. In contrast, the third, to multiply and replenish the earth in order to provide bodies for noble and great premortal spirits waiting to be born on the earth, would be rejected by most Christians who generally did not believe in a pre-earth spiritual existence. The fourth reason, which deals with eternal marriage and deification, is even more blasphemous to the Christian mindset. Lawrence Foster wrote, Smith and his followers identified so strongly with the cultural patterns of the biblical Hebrews that they self-consciously thought of themselves as a modern Israel and tried to recapitulate many of the values and practices of an earlier way of life in their own. Unless one is prepared to assume a priori that the social life and customs of the biblical Hebrews were invalid or that any thoroughgoing attempt to translate different cultural values into one's own experience is inherently psychopathological, one must reserve judgment on Joseph Smith until all the evidence is in. Consequently, to combat the criticisms, several other explanations justifying plural marriage were advanced by church apologists by both LDS and non-LDS audiences. These explanations do not seem to have originated with Joseph Smith or to be directly related to the theological principles he taught regarding plural and eternal marriage. This article will examine four of the explanations offered by defenders of plural marriage that are not currently promoted by the leadership of the LDS Church. Women outnumbered men. Sometimes church members and other observers have assumed that plural marriage was instigated to allow an apparent surplus of women to marry. This disparate ratio would otherwise significantly decrease the possibility for women to marry in a monogamous society. In 1881, church member John C. Kimball declared that he remembered that while living in Nauvoo, polygamy was a common-sense response to the excess female converts. The fact is, while at Nauvoo, our missionaries abroad made converts among single women a great deal faster than among men. The consequence was that, coming into a new community where they had no homes or protectors of their own, we had to parcel them around among our different families. This, we soon found, was given rise to scandal and to possible illicit attachments. And as a matter of decency and morals, we had to provide some way by which this excess of women could have some normal relations to the families where they were placed. Marrying them to their heads with all the safeguards of religion seemed to us the only possible way. And so, using our common sense, we took that as the will of the Lord. No historical evidence supports John Kimball's recollection, but his story demonstrates some of the practical justifications that have been promoted. David J. Whitaker noted that Jedediah Grant used this reasoning in 1851 to justify polygamy to politician Thomas L. Kane, who was defending the church's position to Washington bureaucrats. Grant went on to relate that he had explained to Thomas L. Kane that plural marriage was necessary because females outnumbered males 3-2, and this ratio was forcing many women to marry outside the church. Grant reasoned, in the propagation of our principles and the gathering together of those who embrace them, it was found after 9 years' experience that the aggregate number of females was 3-2 males, showing that 1/3 of our women must remain single or marry out of the church. Either was thought impolitic. The prophet Joseph Smith was left, therefore, to inquire of the great Elohim, who is and ever has been the disposer of this matter, granting from time to time special dispensations according to the situations and circumstances of the people to whom said dispensations were given. The dispensation given by the Lord through the prophet to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is one limited and strict in its nature, like unto the one given unto Abraham and others in his day, and not as elastic as the dispensation which appears to have been in the days of David and Solomon. Non-Mormons also reflected the idea that polygamy might be needed because there were more women than men. In 1852, writer John W. Gunnison wrote, "It is maintained that there is great disparity of numbers between the sexes, and that the predominance of the female is more than can be accounted for from war, the dangers of the sea and other perils, and therefore nature indicates the propriety of plurality, as marriage is honorable to all." Franklin D. Richards argued that beyond the borders of the Latter-day Saints, women outnumbered men as well, and that polygamy could cure the malady of old maidenhood. In the February 17, 1855 Millennial Star, he asserted statistical justification for plural marriage. The census tables disclose one fact of melancholy importance, which has not sufficiently engaged the attention of our social philosophers. They show that, in the largest cities of the Union, the females outnumber the males in the ratio of 10%, so that if every man were compelled by law to take unto himself a wife, a vast number of the fair sex would still be doomed to the torturing hope deferred of old maidenhood. But alas for the ladies, inequality of number is not the only calamity they have to contend against. There is no legal compulsion of every man to marry. In this free republic, each man may exercise a sultanic despotism over his own affections, and in the matter of matrimony consult only his own inclinations. We leave it to statisticians, curious in such themes, to detail the moral and social results inevitable in a condition of female superfluity. The perception that polygamy was instituted to equalize the excess of female to male church members has persisted into the 20th century. As researcher Philip R. Kuntz acknowledged, a 1970 study of 421 residents of rural Utah indicated that the respondents believed a female surplus was the prime reason for the Mormon practice of polygyny. Despite these observations and assertions, a close review of the numbers of women and men in Nauvoo and later in Utah shows that it was never a primary driving force in the practice. Concerning gender census in the West, historian Donna Hill wrote, "The claim of surplus women is not valid, since the United States Census from 1850 to 1940 and all available records of the Utah Church show that men outnumbered women in the church and in Utah." Scientist and church apostle John A. Widtsoe directly addressed this common but inaccurate view. The most common of these conjectures explaining why polygamy was practiced in the 1800s is that the church, through plural marriage, sought to provide husbands for its large surplus of female members. The implied assumption in this theory that there may have been more female than male members in the church is not supported by existing evidence. On the contrary, there seem always to have been more males than females in the church. Families, father, mother, and children, have most commonly joined the church. Of course, many single women have become converts, but also many single men. The argument that polygamy was needed because the numbers of single women exceeded the number of unmarried men is not generally supported by population studies of the period. This explanation appears to have been more of an afterthought. While it may have provided a logical justification that was true in some localities, it had little or no actual impact on the introduction and practice of Joseph Smith's polygamy. Publicity value. An intriguing viewpoint was offered by B.H. Roberts, one of the presidents of the 70 in the LDS Church in 1930. A possible reason mentioned as justifying the introduction of plural marriage into the new dispensation is the publicity value of it. I see nothing amiss in referring to it, polygamy, as possessed of a certain publicity value to the whole work of God, and I know of no single thing in the new dispensation that has done so much to keep this dispensation and its major message before the world as the same principle of plural marriage and the practice of it by the church. It has kept the message well, nigh constantly before men, through the press, daily, weekly, and monthly. It has been the incentive to the multiplication of books on Mormonism. It has kept the new dispensation before state legislatures and Congress House and Senate, before successive United States presidents and their cabinets, before state and territorial courts, and time and again before the Supreme Court of the United States, and through the court has attracted the attention of leaders of thought in all the world. Elder Roberts reflects a distinctive view, apparently suggesting that negative publicity is better than no publicity. It seems unlikely, however, that it produce a positive effect in the Church's missionary program. To solve the world's moral problems. From the very first defense of plural marriage offered by Orson Pratt in 1852, one reason asserted for the establishment of polygamy was to help rid the world of the social ills of prostitution and licentiousness. Orson Pratt asserted that by adopting plural marriage, whoredoms, adultery, and fornication would be entirely done away. Similarly, an unidentified writer in an 1853 article in the Millennial Star penned, "I've come to the conclusion that the one-wife system not only degenerates the human family, both physically and intellectually, but it is entirely incompatible with philosophical notions of immorality. It is a lure to temptation and has always proved a curse to a people." By allowing men to have more wives than one, it was theorized that mistresses and brothels would no longer be patronized by libido-driven men. One church member wrote in 1854, "In Deseret there are no libertines with their paramours, no houses of prostitution, no cases of seduction, or those which disturb the peace of the families in the states under your laws. Here every woman can have what God intended she should, a husband, and every man that wants to may have a wife." A year later, Nauvoo polygamist Franklin D. Richards dramatically expressed the common opinion held by many Latter-day Saints that plural marriage could solve far-reaching immoralities. He started off by outlining the moral corruption he perceived in the world around him. "We cannot without sympathy behold man, who was created in the image of God, to stand at the head of creation, become a poor, effete, degraded being, the woman chaste, beautiful, and lovely, deceived, crushed, bartered, betrayed, sunk in crime, a creature of and for lust, or view the powers given to God to man for the propagation of his species, perverted to debauchery and lasciviousness, with all its revolting, deadly, corrupt, and damning effects, without some regard for fallen humanity." No one can detest the loathsome, degraded, corrupt, and miserable state of the world in relation to lewdness, lasciviousness, adultery, and debauchery more than we do. Then Elder Richards postulated that the practice of plural marriage could alleviate these problems. We would just remark that philosophy, morality, law, and Christianity, as now taught, have signally failed to stop this monstrous social and moral evil. The present state of the world proves their incompetency. The Lord's way, polygamy, as practiced by ancient men of God, the restitution, as lately revealed, we think will stop it among us. While plural marriage might have assisted moral men to control their sex drives by allowing additional wives, it is questionable whether it would have had significant influence on men possessing lesser ethical values. The ability of polygamy to stem the evils of prostitution and other sexual abuses remains unproven. Plural marriage is a health benefit. One argument advanced between 1852 and 1890 involves the assertion that polygamy produces healthier parents and offspring than monogamy, claiming that sexual relations during pregnancy robs the future mother of that vigor which should nourish her embryonic offspring and giving intensified sensual desires to that offspring. Polygamy provides otherwise for sexual relations, thus assisting the husband in maintaining abstinence with pregnant wives. Church elder Orson Spencer wrote in an 1853 pamphlet promoting plural marriage, "Do not startle, sir, if I should tell you that monogamy, or the one-wife system, adopted through Christendom, is a very defective system. It does not answer the demands of society, and it is altogether inferior to the patriarchal system of polygamy as introduced by God himself." In 1870, Brigham Young similarly argued, "Talk about polygamy. There is no true philosopher on the face of the earth but what will admit that such a system, properly carried out according to the order of heaven, is far superior to monogamy for the raising of healthy, robust children. A person possessing a moderate knowledge of physiology, or who has paid attention to his own nature and the nature of the gentler sex, can readily understand this." Heber C. Kimball proposed an even more novel justification. "I would not be afraid to promise a man who is 60 years of age, if he will take the counsel of Brother Brigham and his brethren, that he will renew his age. I have noticed that a man who has but one wife and is inclined to that doctrine soon begins to wither and dry up, while a man who goes into plurality looks fresh, young, and sprightly. Why is this? Because God loves that man, and because he honors his work and word. Some of you may not believe this, but I not only believe it, I also know it. For a man of God to be confined to one woman is small business, for it is as much as we can do now to keep up under the burdens we have to carry, and I do not know what we should do if we had only one wife apiece." Heber Kimball acknowledged that the described benefits were not a result of polygamy itself, but came from God's love and honor that he granted due to obedience. However, Latter-day Saint polygamists sometimes asserted that having more wives made the participants younger and more virile. While some Utah polygamists were motivated to believe these benefits of plural marriage, science has yet to validate them, nor does it seem that modern science ever will. Regardless, a belief in polygamy as a divine fountain of youth, or that monogamous offspring were in any way physically superior to the children of polygamists, seems to have little relationship to Joseph Smith's theology supporting plural marriage, and makes little sense in light of what we know about medicine and psychology in the 21st century.